Find out if you can vote and vote. Okay, great talk.
I like the plug. I love it.
Okay, and so we are now live and streaming on Facebook. I want to thank everyone who has taken time out of their evening to come join us as we speak on what is so heavily talked about in the year 2020, the Black vote. This year, there are a lot of people that are, they have their different reservations with voting, especially when it came to Biden, and who is he going to pick for his, his vice president elect. And so there were a lot of people saying, okay, don't pick for this person, don't pick for that person. Oh, he needs to appeal to the Black person. But the second he picked Kamala Harris, the Black community went with me one or two ways. Either they were extremely excited that a woman that graduated from an HBCU college, is also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, was, leading the movement. But then all of a sudden, a lot of people became interested in her, her justice with criminal, her career with criminal justice, highlighting her paralegal or her prosecutorial record, and all the things that she's done not to uplift the Black community. So it just all of a sudden, all of these, conversations are spewing, but we're not focusing on the main issues at hand. And so that's why we are bringing our panel together to talk about the things that really matter right now, the things that you should take into consideration in her past, and the ways that you can leverage her position for all of our gain. And so tonight we're just going to go ahead and introduce our panel for everyone, and start it off today. So, Ms. Danielle.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Danielle Brown. I am the Senior State Coordinator for Black Voters Matter here in North Carolina. Excited to be on with you again, Dominique. And of course, always my brothers, Marcus and Alan. We always have good conversation, even though, they're late. So it goes to show you how much we really talk to each other. We can throw shade at any point in time. So excited to be with each and every one of you, and excited for this panel tonight.
Awesome. Alan.
My name is Alan Holmes again, and I'm glad to be on again to talk politics as we get closer to Election Day. But just a little bit about myself. I'm a senior advisor for Atlanta City Councilman Dustin Hillis. So from 9 to 5, I'm working on behalf of Northwest Atlanta constituents to address any issues that they might have, and as it relates to the office. But I also have a consulting firm called Roadmap Advisors. It's 4 of us, and we work with candidates who need management, web design, graphic design, and all types of strategic services. So really passionate about working with candidates who are running in criminal justice related roles, whether that be judge or sheriff or district attorney. So just excited to be a part of this discussion tonight.
All right, I'm gonna round it out. Dom, don't even introduce me. Don't even introduce me. I don't need none of that. I'm glad to be here. Marcus Bass. I serve as the executive director of a voting rights advocacy group that is Black led called Advanced Carolina. We're able to do 2 different things: work on a 365-day issue ID focused on environmental justice, economic justice, voting rights, and of course, criminal justice reform, in this case, crimmigration issues. And also we're able to hold power accountable. So most organizations can tell you the issues, they can't tell you who to vote for, and they can't tell you who to vote out, but we can as an organization, and we do. We've done it now for about 6 years, and I'm excited to talk about the intersections between political power and accountability. And I'm glad to get all the shade Danielle has. Give it to me.
And there will be plenty of that, I'm guessing, tonight. And just for the individuals who do not know who I am, my name is Dominique Goodman, and I am the founder of Correctional Views, and organizations whose primary focus is to just promote as much information on America's justice system as possible, more preferably into our youth, to kind of begin to negate the transition of individuals becoming impacted by the justice system, especially streamlining out of school systems. I am also a fellow with Advanced Carolina, which has allowed me to team up with some amazing people, especially this evening, so we can even speak about this. And so, with, the heavy, attention going towards her criminal justice history, that got me a little bit excited, because I started thinking like, okay, people care about reform. People care about all the individuals going to prison. They're highlighting Harris, as she was refusing to hire a private investigation on police brutality in her in her area as she was AG in San Francisco, California. They're sitting up there talking about how she didn't support different bills that were investigating shootings with officers. So you're not going to bring in additional support for that. You're going to be upset with her just because she ruled against the death penalty, feeling that had, it needed some more time to think about it, even though there were currently 174 people waiting for death at that time of her vote. With all of those negative impacts, like Bass, like why do you feel that they were so, relentless to like not highlight the fact that, okay, this is the first African-American woman who has been elected on a major ticket. Let's speak about the good in her. She went to, she graduated from an HBCU college. Like, why are we just pulling out what she's done against Black people?
First of all, thank you for allowing me to join this conversation. I've watched Table Talks for a number of months. I'm a big fan and jump on, not counting it lightly, just being a part of the organization, but seeing your amazing work. So politically, we have a short span of time in which we've been able to engage. If the country is 400 plus years old, we've only been able to participate politically for the last 50 years. And in that span of time, our vote has been marginalized and suppressed. On the flip side, our participation has increased year after year after year, despite the best, laid plans of people that are trying to undermine our vote. And in this instance, North Carolina, the country, is coming out of this representation-based model for Black democracy, right? There was a period of time because we had nobody to look like us in elected office. It was very easy to hit us with the cultural cues of being a first Black, being a first woman, being a first in a cultural lane, but that doesn't speak to the issues, right? In some cases, it undermines the value of the Black voting bloc and the Black issues. And so I think for me and for some of the folks around me, I think we were very excited that a Black woman who was a product of an historically Black college, a product of a sorority, a Black Greek letter organization, of which I am. Those things are definitely something to be proud of and things to make, very solid cases for your history and your grounding. But that doesn't say a lot about what you're going to bring to the table in regards to your political views. HBCUs have Republicans and Democrats. Our organizations, the Divine Nine as a whole, we don't minimize anybody's individual participation based on the basis of your political views. So these things, HBCU origin, Divine Nine origin, they play well when we're talking about, doing campaign stumps during homecoming. But when it gets down to the nuts and bolts of it, those monikers and this understanding of, just being a Black representative or a gender representative, those cues aren't playing with our electoral base of young voters anymore. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, and you're saying it's not playing a base, but like, how much more information do you think that they need to have on the history of Kamala? And so, Alan, I'll tag you in on this. For example, there was a heavy influx of donations for $19.08 for a while towards the campaign, and nobody understood why. And they were like, "Are people just being cheap?" Like, so for the people that don't know the purpose of that donation, like, what is the purpose of donating $19.08?
Well, as far as 1908 is concerned, Kamala Harris is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and they were founded in 1908. So in terms of many of the sorors across the country who are excited about her being nominated as vice president, it was a symbolic donation. I'm sure many donated more than 1908, but it was a symbolic donation. It was a show of, the energy and the excitement that, many sorority sisters of Alpha Kappa Alpha have regarding her nomination to be vice president. So that was kind of the background behind that symbolic donation.
Okay, and just touching on it briefly before we get too deep into it, is that like something that individuals that are part of that organization with her should look to leverage or look as like an alignment with having like being nominated for office right now, or no?
Well, I mean, to add to that, I think that there's a way that we as Black people can leverage, and people who are in sororities and who are AKAs can potentially leverage that connection should she should, Joe Biden be elected in November. But I think more importantly, me personally, I'm more focused on what policies are going to be advanced and pushed to improve Black lives overall. Because I'm an alpha, and she's a sorority sister of mine, given that she's an AK and I'm an AKA and I'm an alpha. But at the end of the day, just prior to us getting to this point, there were a lot of things regarding her record that I had a problem with. I'm, not afraid to say that did not support her candidacy for president. And I have no issues with her personally, but I think we have to get beyond these connections. I'm not going to vote for her because she's an AKA and I'm an alpha. I would have supported her if I had the expectation that the agenda that she was going to push was going to improve Black lives. Because every day I deal with extreme poverty and serious issues that people in Northwest Atlanta have to deal with. And so for me personally, I'm more focused on what someone is going to do for the people who are struggling at the most. These connections, whether we went to HBCU, to me is kind of irrelevant, even though I'm proud of it. But I think that we have to get beyond that, because the condition as a whole for African Americans has not improved. If you look at the racial wealth gap, it's held steady since 1970. So at this point, we need to see improvement in people's lives. So I think it has to get beyond these things that don't necessarily have much of a connection to improvement in life. Some people are excited about that and love the HBCU connection, but I'm more focused on the policy and how African Americans' lot in life will be improved in 4 years should they be elected, or should Biden be elected.
I mean, I think that's good to keep highlighting, like, if individuals are elected. So just to keep on with, people going against her past, like with Harris. She actually ran for district attorney in 2003 in San Francisco. And there's a lot of people learning this year that these are actually positions that you have to be elected for. So Danielle, just tell us current issues right now in our local area that elected officials actually have an impact over and people should be speaking about.
So we have a lot of DAs, we have elected, DAs are elected. A lot of folks don't know and don't understand that DAs are elected positions. So when we're talking about people that, make these crucial decisions as it pertains to our community, our Black people, especially our Black men, we, we're putting people in office that are not in our best interest. And to kind of, piggyback off what Marcus and Alan have both said, we have to think, beyond just what's in front of us. We have to think beyond, the fact that, this is, a Black woman, she's an AKA, this, that. We've got to think beyond that. What else are you bringing to the table that's going to benefit us as a whole? Everybody didn't go to an HBCU. Everybody is not an AKA or an alpha or whatever. And not to say anything against any of that. And that is, we are happy for our brothers and sisters that are part of the Divine Nine. But at the same time, everybody's not a part of that. So what are you bringing to the table that's going to make me understand you and align with you? So when we talk about people that are elected in office, these DAs that are making these crucial decisions about livelihoods, basically, am I going to jail for life or am I, going home? They're making these crucial decisions about our lives, the lives of people. We have to make sure that these are folks that align with our community, that understand the nature of where we come from. Why did we get to this point? What made us make that decision? What made somebody think I didn't have any other choice? What kind of corner did they get backed into where they felt like they had to go do X, Y, and Z to make ends meet, or that, or this, that, thereof? Not saying anything, that, some crimes are just crimes. It is what it is. But at the same time, these are people that make these decisions for us. They are defining where we're going to be next and what we're going to be doing and where we're going to be doing it. What we're hearing on the ground, in the wake of all of the different uprisings and things of that nature this year, we're hearing that people don't care. They don't care about us. They don't care about the Black community. They don't care about what's happened to this person or that person. We are hearing this. We are seeing this. We're seeing that in the wake of COVID-19, we've got people that are in prison, in jail, and they are sitting there with no resources whatsoever to protect them from a virus that is rapidly killing us. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. And these are people that make decisions for us to be in these spaces and how long we're going to be there, whether we're going to get a chance to be out or not. I'm so blessed to have other organizations that I work with that fight for this on a day-to-day basis, that say, hey, look, why are they sitting here, and they're not safe, there's no safety measures in place. We also have to understand too that the accountability side of this, again, like I tell people all the time, we hire these people because when we elect them, we hire them. They work for us. We don't work for them. So that being said, the accountability that we don't hold them to is kind of devastating. But at the same time, we've got people that are in these offices that get reelected, and they horrible, but you continue to reelect them and reelect them and reelect them, and they get put in these positions to make these crucial decisions. We are seeing and hearing on the ground, people are tired. They're tired, point blank period. They're tired of people making decisions for them. They're tired of people saying and doing things that will basically criminalize them no matter who they are. We're criminalized just because of the color of our skin. That people are tired of that. So they're wanting change. And in this instance, what is she going to do about that? What is she bringing to the table to do about that? What are we doing about that on a local scale as it pertains to the people that we are putting in these positions? How are we holding them accountable? We can get mad all day long, but the fact of the matter is we elected them and put them in that position. And if we're unhappy with them, we've got one of two things. We can either sit back and let it keep going to where they're elected year after year after year, or we can build up somebody else and put them into that space and ensure that we've got people that are connected to our community.
I think that's really important to have that connection to the community and know exactly who you have hands on and who you're able to touch. Because speaking of Marks now, back in 2014 and 15 is when Kamala Harris received some of her biggest backlash because she failed to investigate the two Black men and refused a bill of hiring the prosecutor for the wrongful shooting. A lot of people keep placing blame a lot of things on the presidents. However, Obama was the president at that time that she committed this act, and Obama doesn't have anything to do with the decision that Kamala Harris made at that time. So as much as we would like to be angry at the president, we have to come back and realize it's people closer, more tangible to us that we have access to that are making these decisions. Bass, with the current climate in America, is it really okay? As long as Trump is out of office, are there other names on these ballots that we need to focus on right now?
We keep it a ban, as they say in North Carolina. I don't know if they say it everywhere. It's getting worse and worse by the day, right? The bar is getting lower and lower by the day. Kamala Harris was just in North Carolina, was just in Raleigh today, as a matter of fact. And one of the things that's very obvious, two things actually. Number one, I think folks are finally realizing that we have to demand more for our vote than what we have typically gotten. And in this moment, we're realizing the reality that we have literally historically gotten so much that we don't even know how to ask for what we want, right? I think in this moment, whenever we are basing our understanding in a binary of Democrat versus Republican, we forget that the only reason why we are Democrat or Republican is because we had to choose a party that wouldn't kill us, right? When we first received our right to vote, and not just our right to vote, even before then, we were considered 3/5 of a citizen. That was a legally binding policy simply made so we wouldn't have the right to vote. Then whenever we received freedom, quote unquote, from the Emancipation Proclamation, it only freed a certain percentage of Black people. It limited freedom to individuals that may have been incarcerated for whatever reason. So if you happen to run away and you were locked up in the process of being freed. If you were still in jail, you were still in prison. You were still enslaved. Slavery and imprisonment go hand in hand. Whenever you are incarcerated, you lose your voting rights, sadly, but intentionally, right? And so I think for a lot of us, we chose our political parties based on survival, not based on our issue. Our main issue was staying alive. At the time, in the 1800s, it was the Democrats that were killing Black folks. And so a lot of Black folks became Republican. And as a matter of fact, the General Assembly in North Carolina changed in 2010 for the first time over 100 years. It was Democrat controlled. And when you really go back to think about that, if the original Democrats were the individuals that were racially attacking voters, undermining and suppressing the vote, and then it flipped in the 60s and 70s, but North Carolina State Democratic rule, some compromise came in, political compromise that allowed the Democrats to stay in power in North Carolina. And that compromise was undermining Black folks. So we can shift the paradigm from any particular party, but when you really get down to it, individuals of color, Black people in general, have never been served by the two-party system. As a matter of fact, we are some of the most loyal voters. We're some of the most hardest workers on a party level. Danielle is key to that because before she was in Black Voters Matter, she was doing this work 365. And we are continuously undermined by this political system. Regardless of what check you have by your name, D or R, you are not in leadership in the party. As a matter of fact, for the Democratic Party to be a majority Black party, a majority color party, you don't see a lot of Black leadership at the top. That's intentional. And we have to start acknowledging that and examining that. And I think one of the bigger things that our generation and the baby boomers really get into it about is, when does accountability come in? Do you start accountability before the election or after the election? And I think for so many of us, we have seen accountability waged after the election, right? We live in a state where Dr. Barbara has waged a progressive campaign for wages, for healthcare, for education, for voting rights. It started during a Democratic-controlled General Assembly in a Democratic-controlled North Carolina. So I think in some cases we have been so undermined by this two-party system that our value becomes watered down. And so now when you see individuals that are Republican, that are Black, we give them certain monikers or certain negative attributes. Well, guess what? Some of the same individuals on the Democratic side care just as much, if not less, about you than those individuals on the Republican side. And I think until we get our own independent sense of power, I think that's important. The last thing I'll say is this, and I'll pass, Dom. Somebody mentioned agenda earlier, and I always hear anti-Blackness makes us question Black people at every single turn. And that's why we can't harness our power, because a lot of us are fearful. When you talk about the agenda for the Black community, the agenda has not changed since the March on Washington in the 60s, right? The March on Washington was about jobs. It was about police brutality. It was about education. What are we talking about now in the streets? We're talking about police brutality. We're talking about wages. We're talking about education. And so don't let some of those same calling cards of we need a Black agenda throw you off kilter. We have a Black agenda. We've always had a Black agenda, and it's always been undermined by the dominant narrative in these parties, regardless of what party you're a part of. And so I think that is really where, when we get down to the nuts and bolts of just how and why individuals are in certain parties doing certain things, thinking that they'll get a different result, the system shows that it's not the case until we actually create our own power, like happened in Mississippi. Rest in peace, Fannie Lou Hamer. Create our own independent system. We're always kind of volley back and forth between what party is going to kill us less, when we're still getting killed regardless of what party we're in.
Well, we did have a comment they said, we cannot just rely on the president and vice president. We have to make sure that they have the Congress to support their agenda. That goes for the level elections also. Each top executive has to have a supportive legislation body to support his or her goals. We have to demand accountability before, during, and after elections.
Dom, I appreciate that comment, right? But certain things like that, we have lived a lifespan in a short amount of time to where we have seen a president have control of both chambers, right? When Obama came in, everything was set. And what happened when he had control of Congress? Congress didn't do what that Black president wanted him to do. They stopped him at every turn. So I get what you all are saying, right? these people aren't playing by the rules. They're telling you to follow the rules. They're telling you to know the game. And at the end of the day, if the rules don't match where they wanted to go, then they'll rechange the paradigm. So at some time, we have to really examine what it is we're saying, think about what we have just lived through in the past 20 years, and then we have to reimagine deeper, right? It is very likely that we can go beyond a two-party system. It is very likely that we can write a new constitution. These are not foreign concepts, but they don't match the dominant narrative. But if we stay within the system that we have, people just want to go back to the Obama generation. Guess what? People were poor then. People were homeless then. People didn't have access to broadband internet in North Carolina then. How do we set up a political power that makes sure we go well beyond where we were in 2008 and 2012? That's what I'm saying. But we have seen already what it looks like to have a black man or a black person in control. The Democrats have both chambers, and here we are.
Yep. And to add to that, I'll say this. I'll say that what we need, the question that was asked, that was posed is critical. While we do need majorities in the House and the Senate for an agenda to be passed, what we also need is for the Democrats, if they are given that power by the voters in November, to exercise that power. Because what I've seen is the difference between Democrats and Republicans is when Republicans get power, they understand that that power is temporary, because divided government always happens, right? Sometimes the voters want Democrats and they kick the Republicans out. And then sometimes the voters want Republicans and they kick the Democrats out. The Republicans, when they get power federally, always understand that that power is temporary. So what their focus is ramming through everything aggressively that their voters want. And they know that they'll be there temporarily and they'll lose power, but at least they'll have things that have been passed. Democrats tend to be afraid to use the power when the voters give them the power, thinking that they will have power forever, when in most cases, voters prefer the divided government. If the president is a Democrat, the Senate might be Republican. Voters like divided government. So we need, in these first 2 years, if Biden is elected and Democrats control the Senate and hold the House, we need Democrats to flex their muscles and push through the agenda unapologetically that we need. We need no cowardice. We need no fear. It just needs to happen, with the expectation that eventually in 2 years, voters may get tired of Democrats and boot them from one house or the other, whether that be the House or whether that be the Senate. But at least we can say that we left with something. Because right now, with this Supreme Court justice that we're talking about now, Republicans know that the voters are probably going to boot them from many Senate seats. They don't care. They say, look, at the end of the day, if we lose the Senate and get a third Supreme Court justice confirmed, that is going to seal the deal on so many issues that come before the Supreme Court. So they're willing to fall on the sword like a damn kamikaze pilot, basically. They're like, look, this is where we're at. We're going to lose. We don't care. We're going to try to confirm this justice. So what we need is for Democrats, and we will have to push them to push through the agenda that we need passed in the first 2 years, from 2021 to 2023. And so that's very important, I think.
It is. It absolutely is very important, because we see, in the work that we do, like there's all this excitement this year about this election because it's a presidential year. In 2 years, we have to fight people literally to get them involved and get them engaged. And that's not where we need to be. It's like we're counterproductive when we're having to constantly fight people every 2 years to get you moving and get people engaged and get people moving. It's almost like we're redoing everything all over again. But come that fourth year, everybody's like, let's do this, and they're ready. No, you need to stay ready at all times. No ifs, ands, buts about it. North Carolina in itself has an election every single year. There is no reason why we should have low voter turnout even in our local elections. We've seen elections being won and lost by one vote. here in North Carolina, locally. We're not even talking about, outside. We're talking about locally. So we need people that every 2 years to begin to like, hey, look, when there's election coming up, as much as everybody's gung-ho and ready to go this year, we need 3 times as much of that every single year, just on the local level, to be able to make sure that things are pushed in areas where people have like some serious power to be able to make some things happen that are in these elected positions.
Serious power. And that's why what you're doing with Black Voters Matter is so important, is because I get tired personally. I haven't missed an election since I was able to vote, but I get tired of, how are you going to come to a neighborhood where people are not making more than $25,000 a year? The city's not doing what they need to do to keep the infrastructure up in the neighborhood. It's just, the neighborhood's been ignored. So you think some politicos, some people that aren't in Black Voters Matter and are, part of the national party, they think you can just go to a neighborhood that's been ignored once every 4 years and then think that you're going to get respect when you knock on somebody's door and hand them a pamphlet, when you haven't given a damn about what's going on then. So you're right, it has to be ongoing. We have to build the trust with the voters, because to be honest, when somebody tells me, well, I've been here in Atlanta, or I've been here in Detroit, or I've been here in Philly or Chicago, I've lived here for 30 years and my life has literally not improved in any way. Mm-hmm. Nobody can respond to that. And so we have to engage with people consistently and build the trust. Then maybe they'll vote. You know what I mean? I think it's just
who is that education placed on? And so, because I'll just speak on North Carolina, so the ballot for North Carolina is not just the president and the vice president. You got the senator, you got the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, superintendent of public instruction. I can keep going because there's more people to list. Yeah. The auditor, commissioner of agriculture, commissioner of labor, and then the commissioner of insurance. These are all individuals that nobody is talking about right now because we worried about Kamala Harris. How do we get that information into people? Because those people have more of an impact on your life in North Carolina. Like I said, that's just a list for North Carolina. Don't quote me if you live in another state. Yeah. But these people have a closer hand to what's going on to your day-to-day than Harris does.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, we tell people all the time, these are folks, they probably live down the street from you. You can go knock on their door. You can get an appointment with them with no ifs, ands, buts about it and say, no, I don't want to see a staffer. I want to see you. These are all people that you have access to. The problem that we have is we are running like on 3,000 right now because we're trying to get people registered, we're trying to get them voting, we're trying to get their census done, and trying to educate them all at the same time on what these positions even do so that you know what you're going to the polls for. That's a lot to be dealing with in the next 38, 37 days. That's a lot to be dealing with. So when it's all said and done, the accountability piece, the constant conversation, the constant education, it does not stop on November the 3rd at all. We have to, my question is, do you have, as other organizations, as other people that are working in this field, do you have an educational plan surpassing this election? Do you have an accountability plan surpassing this election? These are things that we have to start talking about and making it a 365 conversation, ongoing, no ifs, ands, buts about it, because when it's all said and done, we tired.
It is
a lot. It's like it's almost like your brain is on 110 mode, and it's like that's the reason why Marcus and Alan late, because they too busy.
Yeah, listen, I'll blame it on that.
Yeah, the shade. You know it's coming again.
I like your reason better than my reason, so.
They're out here talking to folks and getting them like, so this is what this is about. This is what you're doing with this. This is what you're doing with that. It has to be different. We have to be different. We have to think on a different basis. And like you said, we got folks worrying about Kamala and what she ain't done and all this other kind of stuff. And we got local people, Black folks, that's in office right now that ain't doing right by us.
Yep. And what I'll say is this, a lot of people, we obviously need to be focused on November. We don't know what's going to happen. We hope the right thing happens. We hope Trump leaves. We hope he's gone, right? But what I'm focused on personally, and many other people are, is January, the middle to the end of January, when, if it all works out as it should, and voters aren't suppressed extremely, and it happens, is that we have a new president. What is going to happen in those 2 years? That's what I'm focused on. And so what we're going to have to do, I think, is that we can't sit back and be complacent and just assume that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Democratic Senate majority is going to do what they need to do on behalf of Black people. We more than likely are going to have some sort of a political action committee, some sort of a heavily funded organization in DC that the minute that we, the voters, grant Joe Biden and Democrats in the Senate the power to control the Senate, that at the same time we demand that they move on specific issues. One of my biggest issues is reparations. And we must push aggressively that at the least that HR 40 is amended properly and passed so that the studying of it happens immediately or as quickly as possible. I think that is going to be critical that in those first 2 years, should the voters elect Joe Biden and give Democrats control of the Senate, because we, at the end of the day, the wealth position of Black people in this country has not improved. And I always come with the data, Dom, so I'm gonna hit y'all with a few things. Controlling for age, gender, education, and region. Black workers are paid 14.9% less than white workers, which means we can't educate ourselves out of this. We can't talented 10th our way out of the wealth gap decreasing. Black people have a poverty rate of 44%, which is the highest of any race in this country. If you look at it from a percentage standpoint, Black Americans are twice as likely to live in poverty as white Americans. The median wealth of Black Americans is $17,000. The median wealth of white Americans is $171,000. And let me hit you with this last one. Between 1983 and 2013, the wealth of white households increased by 14%. During the same time period, the wealth of Black households decreased by 75%. I'm just hitting you with the numbers. I'm not saying who's to blame, and I'm not getting into all that, but I will say that the condition for Black people as a whole has not improved. And so what we have to push for is a bold agenda, because the reason that we have such low Black turnout is because most Black people, whether they know the data I just posted or not, they know that like their life really hasn't improved. Like they're not like blaming, but they just know that like when they sit back and think, their literal life has not improved in any way economically, regardless of who's been in office. So when Democrats get control, we must have an aggressive lobbying operation in place to ensure that the agenda that we need as a people, that there's proper movement on that between the year 2021 and 2023. So I think that's going to be critical.
And I'll just add this one.
Go ahead.
I think there's something more important than Joe, more important than January. It is judges. Yes. In this election cycle, the judges are going to have more power than you realize. One of the reasons why Republicans voted for Trump is because of what is taking place right now. They knew that there would be an immense amount of judges that will be up for grabs in these positions across the country. And he met their demand. That is when we talk about agenda, racism and judges, that is the agenda it seems the other side has. And they have gone in very hard and they've appointed these judges with no experience, no background, with one agenda to be extremely, extremely oppressive. And we have seen them dole out a lot of unfair punishment since they've been in office. So the judges this year in North Carolina, we can elect a Supreme Court justice, we can elect Court of Appeals judges, judicial candidates up and down the ballot. And before you see anybody else, if you get a traffic ticket, you're going to see a judge. If you go before any type of legal process, you're going to see a judge. And a lot of times you'd be surprised at how they dole out justice, not always based on what they were trained or it was based on training, but more so conditioning than actual understanding of law and humanity. So I think that's important. And the last thing I'll say, one thing Alan said at the end, our numbers are historically low, I would say, because of the traumatic experience that is democracy for African Americans, right? Individuals just 30, 40 years ago were burned and killed on a bus for going to register people to vote. You had to repeat the Constitution and give pay a poll tax. Now you're gerrymandered into districts. You were counted as 3/5 as a citizen, as I said earlier. These are traumatic experiences just to vote. So we have to look at it, if you can go back, and they have had studies that show that individuals, even if they weren't directly connected to the Holocaust, as descendants, they carried that genetical trauma. Imagine what type of genetical trauma we carry through some of these experiences. And then on top of that, if the trauma isn't enough, they're still suppressing the vote. So I think after a while, you are right, Alan, they just get sick and tired of the theory of insanity in this ballot process. But I do think that the resistance and the answer this year, like never before, is definitely in these down ballot races where they don't have to worry about the Electoral College. They can use their power to make a difference in these local races.
Yep. And Dominic, I just want to say one thing, and it's that when I sat back and thought about it, in the past election, I voted for Hillary Clinton in the primary and Hillary Clinton in the general. But the more that I sit back and just am honest with myself, I will say that the Black voters, whether they were in Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, those that were just fed up and didn't vote because there really wasn't a Black agenda for that Hillary Clinton proposed, and they were tired. We're all tired. It is because of those people who did not vote that every Democratic nominee who ran for president actually had a Black agenda. It wasn't because of me, who votes all the time, because I vote because, I'm passionate about politics, and I would probably never not vote, even if I'm frustrated. But to me, the ugly truth of this is, though, even though we've had to deal with Donald Trump and that the ugliness of everything that has happened, the reason that Democrats and Joe Biden and all the nominees actually rolled out a Black agenda was because they were scared to death that the Black people who did not vote in 2016 are not going to vote again. It wasn't because of me, because I'm just one of those people that will always vote, even though I will be vocal. It was, and that's the interesting part about this, is that the people who didn't vote actually deserve some credit for getting the party itself to understand, damn, oh crap, we got to actually have to do something to get their vote. They might not come out. And so I hope it doesn't happen again. I really don't. I do. But I think that I'm surprised that we've gotten this far, because you had Pete Buttigieg, you had Elizabeth Warren, you had Kamala Harris, you had Joe Biden, you had Cory Booker, and you had Julian Castro. All of them and others had some sort of a Black agenda, only because they were scared to death that Black voters would sit home again. So the ugliness of democracy sometimes is when people sit home, that gets the agenda advanced, though it is most certainly ugly and painful. It can be.
Well, usually I don't jump too much into these conversations on the table talk, but I feel that I have to be the representative on this case, because people don't really, voter suppression isn't very impactful to majority of Black Americans, as it is to myself. Dominique Goodman, I am listed as America deems it, a felon that has her rights to suppress the vote. I cannot vote in 2020 election because I am still on probation, and that it doesn't curb my taxes. It doesn't stop me from paying elected officials. It just says, hey, you cannot be trusted to pick which person is going to come up with bills and legislations against your group of individuals. And I feel that that is the biggest catastrophe. I feel that is the biggest thing that candidates don't have to worry about, is this overnight mass of individuals that are elected to vote. So you have so many discrepancies in that. It literally depends on which state you come out of. If you leave Maryland, you leave prison tomorrow, they're voting. Maine, you're voting. North Carolina, they just passed it. If you don't owe any money on probation, they'll be able to vote. However, the mass group of people still serving their probation till, they cannot vote. Arizona, you are not voting as long as you are on paper. And I feel that it is a high curtailment of people that actually have things to actually go to these people and say, hey, I need your help in some systems and some policies and some attention directed this way. However, this is the highest majority of individuals in America that cannot vote. And so there has to be a day where that comes into play and our voices start mattering a little bit more against these regulations that are, stopping our voices. So that just wanted to touch on that real quick. Once again, there's a website, check to see if you can vote. Your vote might matter. We do have a question though. It says, while I have some reservations about Kamala's past practices, can we really afford to have an alternate to the Biden ticket, which would divide the Democratic vote, ensuring Trump's reelection?
Absolutely not. Not absolutely not. No, I agree with what they're saying. My point is that my whole focus, and I think that what I want to emphasize is that once they assume office, our work is just beginning to get the agenda that we need. Because I think there's going to be a lot of complacency in some people, because you have people who, Dominic, are going to drag themselves to the polls. They may not like Joe Biden, they may not like Kamala Harris, but they're going to vote because it's like, it's going to be the end of the world, and people are just tired of the way things have been going, right? There's a lot of people who are going to get complacent and are going to just say, all right, well, I voted. Well, hopefully they fix it all. That's not how it works. After they have assumed the power, there is still going to need to be pressure to enact the agenda that we need. And again, that's the beauty of it, is that it's completely possible for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and a democratically controlled Senate to pass what we need them to pass after they've been pressured. Sometimes it's ugly. This whole thing in terms of getting legislation passed can be very ugly and aggressive, and that's fine. But we need to understand that there no complacency will not get us to where we need. We need to get Trump out, but at the same time, we need deliverables. If we install certain people within office, we need deliverables. No questions asked. So people, groups, everyone's going to just have to get ready to put the work in. The work doesn't end in November, it begins. It actually begins mid-January. So that's my statement on it.
I think also too, I think it's always interesting that anytime Black people or young people have a demand in exchange for our vote, it is always deemed as extreme or radical or hurtful or harmful to the process, right? We can go all the way back to, again, the 50s and 60s, or we can go back to slavery. Just the ability for us to want to be free was deemed too radical for the construct. And so even in this moment, right, since young Black people have begun taking to the streets, it has been criticized and chastised more than it has been accepted. I think it wasn't until this more recent iteration of the movement for Black Lives under the outcry of injustice under Breonna Taylor, rest in peace, and George Floyd, rest in peace, that folks really began to see the legitimacy and the long-term narrative of the Black Lives Matter movement. But for years, I can remember being in the streets whenever a young man was lynched in Eastern North Carolina, Lennon Lacy, hung by a clothesline. His mother found him with ants crawling down his body the next morning. I can remember us going down to Bladenboro and in the street saying, no justice, no peace if we don't get it shut down. And folks were asking, well, what are you going to shut down? Since that time, the government has been shut down 4 different times. So I think in a lot of cases, like, we chastise our young people, which is a historical flaw that we didn't learn from African roots. We've learned it from some other society. But I think in a lot of cases, our humanity is always going to be viewed as radical. you wanting somebody's knee off of your neck is going to be questioned about how violent you are. Did you have a gun? Somebody coming into your house, shooting you while you were asleep or watching TV is going to be challenged or deemed radical because you had to be doing something for the police to provoke you, or you had a gun when it is a natural inclination of anybody in America to be able to own a gun. And so I just think we have to get past this process where anti-Blackness create situations where our freedom is deemed as too radical for the politic. In reality, other groups ask for less and get more. Do you think that white individuals are flooding city council meetings and county commissioner meetings and city hall meetings? No, they're not. They send one email and it gets done. As a matter of fact, we call the office. We come to the meeting with a well-prepared speech, and they tell us that we're at the wrong meeting. Whereas the white person could be at the wrong meeting, and a staff person will usher them into the right location and then follow with them immediately. So I just think that and again, we just have to take our rose-colored blinders off. Black people are the most American. We are the most patriotic. We are the most loving and affirming of this country. And we get the butt to kiss of the system every single time. And it will continue to be so until we stop allowing others to deem our humanity or our policies or our voting rights extreme or problematic. I think we have to examine that for what it exactly is.
Yeah.
So my question is, and you say that we get, basically the boot to kiss every single time. What happens in situations where we have African Americans that are standing in prominent roles that we feel aren't acting in our best interest, i.e. Cameron?
Well,
so that becomes like, well, people have to see that. So you have like young kids. I had my nephew tell me, like, do we trust all Black men because of what happened with Daniel Cameron? So it's just like, if he would let them, if he's saying it's okay, so are all Black, literally, it's a question I get, are all Black men for us or all Black men against us? And I was like, how are you going to ask me that about Black men? I'm also not a Black man, but this is a role that children are looking at right now. So how do you speak to them on that image of what Black is supposed to represent in America when that's our image right now?
Well, I'll say that as far as Daniel Cameron is concerned, I would tell people, and Tamika Mallory said it eloquently, that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And at the end of the day, when people ask you whether Black men are going to support Black women, you have to understand that there are some Black men and there are some people that don't think like the people like we all do on this Zoom call. If you research, and I talked about this online, I did my research on Daniel Cameron. When I found out that he was a hardcore Republican, he worked for Mitch McConnell, he got Mitch McConnell's blessing. A lot of times with a lot of Black Republicans, I find with them is that they're more extreme than like your regular white Republican because they feel like they have to do so to be accepted. And so, no, nobody should have ever assumed that Daniel Cameron was going to do the right thing and indict the officers, because Daniel Cameron's whole political makeup never would have, if people did research, never would have shown that he would have done that. And that's why everybody kind of hoped that he did the right thing. I've been in politics, and Bass and Danielle has been in this long enough to know a lot of times people just don't do the right thing in politics because it's the right thing to do. I wish they did. I'm sitting over here mad that people don't do that. But I'm 34 and I'm old enough to know that that's not how it works. Daniel Cameron is going to do exactly what his political makeup dictates that he would do. And him not charging the officers should have been a surprise to no one if you looked at his background. And so to answer questions, Dominique, you need to let people know that just because it's a Black face doesn't mean that they're willing to fight for Black lives. You look at these instances we've had in New York where the gentleman had mental disorders and what they put the plastic bag and suffocated him. That was a Black police chief in Arizona where the Black family was taken out of their minivan and put face down on the ground with guns. The police chief was Black. Tatiana Taylor, in that instance, Botham Jean in Dallas, the police chief was Black. So we can never assume that because someone looks like us, that they're out to protect Black lives. We always want to believe it, right? When we see them get on the news, we just feel like they wouldn't allow that to happen to us, right? But isn't it crazy that in many of these instances, the police chiefs have been Black? So we need to kind of judge people based on their track record and what has happened, not really whether they look like us or not.
So I guess my question then would be to Ambassador Danielle, like once it's revealed, their position and the harm on our life, then what's the next step of action? So if you're telling me he just did something, but he can't get voted out, then what do I do?
So what you, I laugh at this because ultimately when it's all said and done, people do really, really feel like sometimes that they are invincible. Like they just gonna be here forever. And I'm just looking at you like, okay, you really, really thinking this right now. In these cases, we as a community, we have to change our frame of mind. We have to change the way we look at this process, the way that we are a part of this process, and even from beginning to end. I was lucky in the sense that I got to teach Freedom School this summer. And in doing that, I had a whole bunch of young folks that were not excited about this election at all when we first started. Like, at all. Like, I ain't voting, I ain't doing it. I know this, y'all gave us these cards to be dealt, and I'm not for it. By the time it was, and I had this great, wonderful, presentation, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, you know what, let's scratch this. Let's just have a real conversation about how y'all are feeling and what you really, really want and what you're looking for. When you're talking to people and you putting it on the level of where they are and meeting people where they are, you're putting this in their pockets. You're putting this in their everyday livelihoods. Can you go to the store? Can you get food? Can you do this? Can you do that? What does your rent look like? When you start talking real to folks and putting it in a real conversation and saying, well, hey, look, you realize that you are an entrepreneur. You basically, at this point, hire and fire these folks that are in office. How do you do this? And then you start going through the process of how you do it and what it looks like and how it makes more sense to them. When you put that ownership on people, you give them that little bit of, hey, look, let me listen to you. Let me give you that little bit of love. It activates a type of power that is unreal. It is unreal to see how people respond to that type of power. So these folks that feel like they're invincible get a chance to come up against all this power on this side over here to where they are saying, you know what, I think I'm a little scared now. This man needs to be a little scared because there's some power out there that folks have activated at this point based off what he just did and what he just said, that he needs to be really scared right about now, because he ain't got much longer in the position he's in, whether they, one way or the other. He really, really doesn't. And that's the way that people need to be thinking about this. Part of our issue, is that I'm sorry, y'all, Republicans are planned for the next 10 years. They got their plan. We working on our plan for tomorrow. We are behind. We have to learn to activate this power and let people know what type of power they truly, truly have when it's right in front of them. That's part of our issue. We have to change our thought process. Again, make it a 365 conversation. And when you're talking to people and they feel like there's just no more hope, nothing else that can be done, this is what the cards that have been dealt, saying, hey, you know what, there is something else that you can do. And there is more to this process of what can be done. So we're coming up against 400 years of drama, oppression, suppression, whatever else you want to call it. We're in the fight of a 400-year fight, because it's over 400-year fight. Yes. And dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. Right now, it's coming to a head, and people don't know how to respond or what to say. But at the same time, they're also scared to death. If they were not scared, they wouldn't be doing everything under the sun, putting billions of dollars into coming to see us in North Carolina like they do every other day. I don't know why, just stay up out my state. But you hear I mean, but since you here, let me show you what this power is going to look like, and let me show you what it really, really means. They would not be spending all this money. They would not be doing all of these different things to keep us from where we need to be, to keep us down, to keep us suppressed, oppressed, whatever. They would not be doing that. They invest in our suppression and oppression. They invest in that. So we have to learn to invest in our power, in our success, and build people up and build other folks that can take the places and know where we're coming from and what it really truly looks like in our communities.
Yeah, and Dominique, what I want to add is, and Danielle, I just want to salute what your organization is doing, Black Voters Matter and the Black Male Voter Initiative, because I was able to go to a Black Male Voter Initiative event here in Atlanta. And I think Dominique, when you talk about this a lot in terms of what can we do to inform and start engaging people on their level, start to really be getting into our communities. And what it's going to take is organizations like Black Voters Matter that are completely separate from, I guess you can say, the Democratic Party apparatus. These are people who Black Voters Matter and the founders understand the Black community. And so what we need is for all these Democrats who have all these hundreds of millions of dollars, because if you didn't know, last week, when the Supreme Court Justice died, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Democrats donated $300 million in a week. So what we need is for the money to be going directly to organizations that are Black-led, that are grassroots, that are doing the nonstop work, engaging in our communities. And once that happens, then a lot of this stuff will be solved. It's just that the people who understand our communities the best for too long never got the funding they needed. But yet you have all these Democrats who are just as rich as Republicans. You see all the money that's flying out here. So we just need organizations that are rooted within the community to really engage people who may have never voted in their life and are 25 and are pissed off and tired. We need organizations who are really being able to speak to our communities, to be funded to continue to do the work they're doing, because it doesn't end. A campaign begins and ends, but Black Voters Matter and Black Male Voter Initiative are things that are going to be ongoing. And so we just need to be able to fund these organizations to then be able to reach people where they are. I think that's very important.
Well, I have a question. Actually, I have two questions, and I'll read the first one off. It says, you said to prepare an accountability agenda, but who is actually preparing this agenda?
So Black Voters Matter, in the sense we're 365 organization. Our accountability, here we go. Let's get this done. What are the issues? And to be honest, we have been working here in North Carolina with Advanced Carolina and other organizations across the state for how long, Marcus? Talking about accountability and what it looks like, and a Black agenda. And these are things that are already working and that are already in place, that are already, folks are meeting like on a weekly basis to have these conversations to figure out what this agenda and what this accountability is going to look like, because we can't wait until November the 3rd to make an agenda. This has already been talking about, and that's the thing. We have to work to do this on an ongoing basis. That agenda is constantly changing. That work is constantly changing, because every day we're constantly up against something else, and something else is coming new that we're working against. The thing about it too is we have to learn to work together, not against each other. Part of our issue is Black folks, we always working against each other. Oh, Marcus, you got $100 grand over here. I ain't talking to you because I didn't get it. What are you talking about? Work together to figure it out. You may have something over here that I need. I don't need to be working on top of you to figure out what needs to happen next. We have to learn to work together. We have to learn that if you're doing texting over here, well, I'm doing calls over here. If you're doing, knocks and, literature drops over here, well, then I'm taking folks to the polls. We have to learn to work together and stop being so counterproductive in the work. That's a big part of our accountability right there, is working together and ensuring that things are met. Because the thing about it is, if y'all look at it, the other party, they work together. They come, they may not agree, they may hate each other today, but when they get in front of them cameras, they all standing together like ain't nothing happened. They're not showing their dirty laundry at all. We don't always do that. We always want to, go up against each other instead of working together. And that's the biggest part of what it means to even have an accountability plan, even have an accountability agenda, is being able to work together. Because if you ain't got it over here, maybe I have it over here.
I'll say this too, 400 years ago, white folks got into a room and said, how are we going to govern this country?
Yep.
What do we need to do to govern this country? Because we need to keep the Negroes working for free, and we need to keep this thing moving, and we need to make sure the poor white people fall in line, because if they get too close to the black folks, they're going to want too much freedom. So they didn't have a caste system in America the way they had in Africa, but the caste system here was class and race. And so they undermined our ability to build a system. And then they used this marker Democrat, this marker Republican. At one time it was Whigs and Terrys, but they used these, and these are not our tools. So when we talk about recreating the system, recreating the party, using these independent organizations like Black Voters Matter, Advanced Carolina to build this system, it is coming back to that answer of your question, Dom. That's how we get folks that are not doing right out of office. That's how we hold power accountable. Because at the end of the day, the win and loss column is all that the parties are concerned about. A party's vested interest is to keep the majority of their candidates in power, not to help make things more different or to make things better, but it is to stay in power, to maintain power. And by whatever means, in the finite balance of power, if you have to give this much to the Black community just to get them on board, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's not about building community. It's about keeping themselves in power. And I think for our interest and purposes, for the folks that have been on this Zoom now, that are watching online, over 40 people still with us, it is about that power. It is about making sure that we're not just going to concede power to somebody because they have a D or R by their name, or because they look the same way as we're going to hold them accountable. In 2018, nobody thought that you could get sheriffs out of office. Sheriff is the oldest elected position in the land. There was, people that have been in sheriffs in a community for 100 years. The same family man had the control of that sheriff office, and the role of sheriff has a lot of power behind it. It has a lot of budget behind it. The jails, maintaining a lot of contracts with the school districts and security inside the system. And so people thought it was impossible until we showed them how independent Black political power can help shift the system outside of just the progressive establishment alone. We went out in community and organizations across the board, did a lot of deep education around the role of sheriff. And in return, we saw a number of sheriffs in North Carolina be repealed. We repealed racist old sheriffs. Now, 2020, are the sheriffs that were elected in 2018 doing everything they need to? No. Will they stay in office? No. We're going to make sure that the individuals that are not holding accountable the community that got them in get out. And we also are not doing that in a radical or obstructive process. We're not talking about having folks run rampant in the streets, but we're talking about changing a system from the bottom up and not being satisfied with just having Black individuals in office, but having folks in office that care, that get it. And if they don't get in line and they're not, accountable to the people, then we'll do what we can within our power as C3s and C4 organizations to make sure that power is held accountable. And for a lot of people, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Would that be your response? Because like somebody else was bringing up, what would you tell the people that are still trying to decide whether they vote or not? Like, would you provide them with examples of what you've been able to do? Because there's a lot of people, like Alan said before, like, I've been looking at my condition and it ain't changing and I'm still voting.
Well, I'll say this. It's really on people like Marcus, me, and Danielle to do what we can and use our skills to create organizations that can push for the change that people want to see. We have to be honest with people, and we had to tell them, we had to be real with them and let them know, yeah, your life hasn't changed, but our organizations are pushing to hold our elected officials accountable so that they can push forward agendas that will improve our lives. There's no guarantee in any of it happening, but all you can do is tell people straight up that your organization or your movement or what you're pushing is working very hard to see changes being made. And just remember, there's always progress, even if it happens slowly, because even in Atlanta, we booted our sheriff that we've had for what, 3 or 4 terms. Ted Jackson, if I showed a picture of him right now, he would look like one of our grandfathers. You probably would think, oh, he's a nice old man. No, Ted Jackson looks like us, but Ted Jackson was a huge proponent of police brutality. So many people died in Fulton County jails, I can't even count. Ted Jackson wouldn't even allow police officers from cities within Fulton County who came to the Fulton County jail to have their cameras on when they were in the jail. What do you think was happening in the jail to where he didn't want cameras on? So he was booted from office, thankfully. So I think that, like Marcus said, we need to hold our sheriffs and these criminal justice related elected officials accountable, because that's the only way. We can't get complacent. We can't think that because they look like us that they're actually for us. We just need to look at their record. We need to judge them fairly on their record. And if the record does not line up, they have to go, period. So I think that's the approach we kind of need to have in terms of the organizations and people who are involved.
We also have to be, this is the old cliche, we have to be the change we want to see. We are not, as it pertains to even our schools, our kids are not being taught, anything as it pertains to, Black history, quote, Black history, I'm gonna say it like that. They're not being taught there. When it comes to civic and civic engagement, they're not being taught that anymore. That is not there anymore. So we have to do, go extra steps and go extra hard and start teaching our children and letting them be a part of this process, because those are our leaders. Those are the ones that we gonna be voting for, or whatever. If you see something wrong, you see something happening in a community, we need to be building those next leaders and teaching them what it means and how they can be a part of this. It's funny to me how, we want to omit our youth, but the fact of the matter is, even when I was running a voter registration office, I used to tell people all the time, you want to know what's going on in somebody's house? Ask a kid. They will tell you everything that is going on in somebody's house. Oh, my cousin just moved in. Oh, really? Well, how old are they? Well, we need to get them registered to vote, get them updated. Why? Because they just moved. So we already know their voter registration is not going to match. Yeah. But a kid will tell you that. But those are folks that is an element that we need to tap into. And again, 365 basis all the time. These are things that we need to be doing and engaging folks all the time. Take one elected office and teach about it for a week so that people understand and know what it looks like, when it comes to voting, so that they know that when they go to after they know what the office is, they know what it does, they followed Alan and they know what the person is about, they've done their research, and now they go into markets and saying, hey, look, well, what you think, this is who y'all have. Okay, well, this is what we're doing on this side. This is how we all work together. This is how it all connects. But it has to be that type of framework and thought process and change in conversation. It cannot be the status quo anymore. It won't work. We've seen it not work, and we've seen what has happened. If we want political leaders in our offices that think like us, act like us, look like us, and are truly true to us, then we have to be able to build those political leaders from ground zero on up.
Yep, and I think candidate recruitment, to me, the way I feel lately, is just as important as voting, because we need to have both of those messages and be communicating that and make sure that that's taken care of, because obviously we need to vote, but we need to make sure that we get as many people who are passionate, who are real, who are entrepreneurs, who are not entrepreneurs, who are just people who want their communities to improve, to think about running for office. Because if we have people voting, but we have the same crooked politicians on the ballot, somebody who doesn't vote normally and voted because Marcus, Danielle, or me told them to, when they vote for that crooked politician, because that was the only person on the ballot, when their life doesn't improve, then they're looking at me, Marcus, and Danielle saying, well, you said vote. So like, why isn't anything happening? So we need to say vote and encourage voting, obviously, but we also need to ensure that we're funding organizations that are focused on candidate recruitment, because there's a lot of bright people in this country, in North Carolina, Georgia, everywhere, who could be an elected official. They just think they can't do it. They feel like you have to have some experience or a resume. No, this ain't rocket science. This isn't like being an engineer. I'm not gonna lie to you. Being a politician is not rocket science. You need some good people around you, but anybody can do it if they have a good heart and they want to help and they're not crooked. And so we need to be encouraging many people from different walks of life to consider becoming an elected official at the same time as we encourage people to vote.
I think that is a great thing to actually get out, that people need to be consider becoming elected officials. I feel that people need to also know that regardless of your voice, and I will always speak on behalf of those that are impacted by the justice system, we may not be able, some of us may not be able to slip in a ballot, but we are more than able to be in attendance to a lot of things. We are more than able to launch our voice. We are more than able to be actionable in all of these events that we would like to see. And just because you cannot write something on a slip of paper does not mean your impact will not be powerful. So just know that as well. Do you guys have anything left to say to anybody in the Black community still that might be skeptical about the power of their vote and where they're drawing their attention to this year?
I just want to say this. First of all, it's been wonderful being on this panel with people that I really respect on all different regards. I think it's going to take this year us doing things like we've never done before. Don't just be satisfied with being the person on the phone arguing with somebody about going to the polls. Be the person that's going to take them to the polls safely. If you feel the need to do things from home because of the social distance parameters and COVID-19, make phone calls, but best believe, don't be scared, because there's a threat worse than COVID-19 if we don't vote this year. I also want to, and I did this today when I met her, I thanked Kamala Harris for being a Black woman that was not afraid to put it out there. I think there's so many different reasons why we have to continue to throw ourselves at this system. That resiliency and what we learn each and every single time we come up to the plate, I think is very vital. And regardless of if she wins or not, the fact of the matter is this: if she was good enough to be a vice presidential nominee, then she was good enough to earn the money and receive the support to get her to that presidential status. And I think it's a shame how time and time again, Black candidates have to take the consolation prize for being the enthusiastic turnout, but was not good enough to receive the nod at the very top. And so I know that things will fall where they may. Our organization on the C4 side, we do endorsements. We're not doing federal level endorsements, but we are weighing in on the local issues that matter. We have a Favored 5 campaign where we're focusing on the 5 council estate races that are favored by the Black community, starting at the top with the Chief Justice all the way down to making sure that folks remember the Court of Appeals and County Commissioner, legislative races, remember your council estate and all of that. So, it is a lot more than president, and I'm glad we spent this time today.
So one thing I'll say is, my last words is just that, however people choose to vote, whether that be to vote in person or vote by mail, please just do some research and ensure, especially if you're voting by mail, just ensure that you're doing it properly. Make sure that you're putting your ballot in both envelopes, not just one, but 2. Make sure that you're signing it as you should, because in Georgia, if your signature's off, they could toss your ballot. I just want, from an education standpoint, for people to just be very careful as they're filling out their ballot, just to fill it out properly, because really it is serious business. And I want everyone who wants to exercise their right to vote to do it the right way. And I know many people are voting by mail. I just want them to do it properly. So I would just leave by saying, take your time, When you are at your house filling out your ballot that is coming in the mail, just take your time. If you have questions, I'm sure you can call Black Voters Matter. I'm sure there's a lot of resources you can call, not with suggestions on how to vote, but just to be able to fill it out properly, because the last thing we want is for people's ballots to be thrown out and for there to be any issues. So we just want it to be as smooth as possible, even though I feel like on election day in November, it's going to be crazy, but we just want it to be as smooth as possible. And if you can vote early, please early vote. Election day, November is going to be insane. You have every right to wait on that day to vote if you choose, but please try to early vote or vote by mail if you can do it
And
correctly.
just real quick before you, Danielle, I just wanted to let people know, if you're going to mail, just try to mail in person if you can. If you're going to go out in person, plan your trip before so you have a plan to do this. Take your ballot directly to a drop off, Board of Election, if you can. And nobody can take your ballot for you. So if it's for your vote, make sure it's you that's dropping it off. You can track your ballot if you do mail it in. Track it and call Board of Elections if it doesn't arrive in 2 weeks or less. And the public can be there during the counting of your mail-in ballots. Certain social distancing rules may be required. While you can't look at each ballot, you can be there to question if the ballot was taken or not by the machine.
And if you live in Georgia, just pray, because y'all know what we deal with here. We just over here praying. So just pray that it all works out.
Okay, Danielle, did you have anything closing?
Oh my goodness. So I will definitely all of what everybody else said, and basically and get involved. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can get involved. For those of us who are doing this, 24/7 right now, that we're eating, sleeping, and breathing it, it's exhausting, but it's all well worth it. And we need help. We need folks, we need all boots on the ground, everybody, working masked up, phone, text, whatever you can get involved with. Just pick a day and say, hey, look, I'm going to do text calls for an organization, or I'm going to do phone calls for an organization, or I'm simply just going to call 5 of my family and friends and say, hey, do you have a voting plan? And let's see how we can get this together. Make sure that you understand the rules and the regulations. If you don't, make sure you're reaching out to orgs that can definitely help you to get that understanding. But please, there's more than enough work out here for everybody to get a piece of it and be involved and say that they contributed in one way, shape, form, or fashion in this election, not just by casting my vote, but I actually participated in the process. So please, we're begging, we're asking, pleading, whatever, for everybody to get involved, and bring the kids. I mean, it's a family-friendly affair. We take the babies all day long. We do Zoom calls with babies. We do text calls. Actually, the texting, the kids are better at it than we are. So, so definitely, please, get involved in some way. And like everyone said, vote early. If you're voting by mail, just know the rules and the regulations of it. Know what's going on in your state, and as it pertains to the rules and regulations that you have. All of them are different, and it may be different by one word, but they are all different. So please know what that looks like in each one of your states.
So for North Carolina, real quick before we wrap up, and Alan, you can answer for Georgia, is there a website location that lists all the information about the ballot and different things with voting?
Pick one.
I'm just reading a question. They said one-stop website that tells you everything.
No, you're right. So I don't believe there is, but there is a site called Ballot Tracks, which I will put in the type in the message, where if you vote by mail, you can track your ballot, and they will give you a notification as to when it's been mailed, when you receive it. I don't believe there's a site that just has every election and what people are running for. There may be, but I know as far as the vote by mail situation, the state has created a website to kind of make it easier. But I'll leave that as well for the everyone who has attended.
When I said pick one, I was really serious, because all of the organizations that are working are connected in some way, shape, form, or fashion to NC Voter voter.org, the State Board of Elections, to where you can, automatically, it's a click of a button to be able to get that information. And I did put the website for Black Voters Matter as well. We cover 10 states. Georgia is one of the states that we do cover. So you can literally go to the Georgia side and see everything that you need as far as rules, regulations, one-stop shop, whatever you need to be able to take you there. So there's so many different, like I said, if you're working with an organization, 99.9% of the time, they have already designated some part of their page to the voting and to all the rules, the regulations, what you need right now, because things are constantly changing, and we need people to be able to go on there, click, and say, this is where what I can and can't do.
The easiest way to get the information, the North Carolina State Board website, ncsbe.gov, ncsbe.gov. You can pull up your information. You can search, your ballot. You can pull up your sample ballot. You can see exactly what your ballot is going to look like on election day. And again, like Danielle said, all the other websites, but definitely that ncsbe.gov website. If there's not information there, then the plethora of other organizations would be good, but the state board has a very comprehensive website. It includes the ballot tracks that Alan was speaking up to.
Awesome. So all I would like to do is just thank all of my panelists for taking the time to be here today. Just spread some education and just let everybody know, like, there's a lot of people to look at right now. There's a lot of people that hold power over things that are happening in your local community, and don't get distracted by what you should be paying a lot of attention to right now before you walk into that voter booth. There's people like myself that are jealous. So please don't, never be not grateful to be able to vote. Your vote matters. Thank you guys so much.
Look, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Peace.
Thank
Be careful.
you.